Margaret Hayes had lived 80 years without ever owing a penny to anyone. But this morning, when she opened her banking app, the balance showed $10 million. Before she could even call the police, a black envelope was slid under her front door. Inside, 4 words were written in letters cut from a newspaper. "Give it back, Margaret. The problem, the money didn't come from a bank. It came from a glitch in an AI system belonging to an international cartel. Now, Margaret has 12 hours to return what isn't hers, or face the consequences. Stay until the end, because what she discovered about the origin of this money will make you question everything you know about digital security." Margaret's life in her small cottage had always been governed by routine. Tea at 4, tending to the roses at 5, and checking her modest retirement balance once a week. She lived alone. Had lived alone for the past 7 years since her husband passed. Her days were quiet, predictable, safe. The kind of life where nothing unexpected ever happened. Where bills were paid on time, and the biggest excitement was a new mystery novel from the library. But on that Tuesday morning, the routine was shattered. Margaret had gone to the ATM to withdraw her usual $40 for the week's groceries. The screen of the ATM didn't show the usual $300. It showed 8 digits, $10 million deposited by a ghost account named Nemesis. Margaret stared at the screen. Certain it was a mistake, she pressed the balance button again. The numbers didn't change. 10,003 cents, sitting in her modest checking account, as if it had always been there. Her first thought was identity theft. Someone had hacked her account, but the deposit was into her account, not out of it. Her second thought was bank error, but $10 million? Banks didn't make mistakes that big. Her hands trembled as she checked the transaction history. The deposit had occurred at 3:47 a.m. that morning, while she'd been asleep. Account origin, Nemesis, protocol 7749. No bank name, no routing number she recognized. If you found $10 million in your account, would you return it or disappear? Subscribe to the channel right now to follow this journey of survival. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the conclusion. Margaret tried to call the bank, but the lines were dead. Every number she tried, customer service, fraud department, her local branch, went straight to a recorded message. "All circuits are busy. Please try again later." It was 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. Banks didn't have all circuits busy at 9 a.m. That was when she heard the sound, a faint slide of paper against the wooden floor of the entryway. Margaret's cottage had a mail slot in the front door, something left over from when the house was built in 1952. She rarely used it. Mail came to the box at the street, but someone had just pushed something through. She walked slowly to the door, her heart beginning to pound. On the floor was a black envelope. No stamp, no address, just her name written in the same cut-out newspaper letters she'd seen in thriller movies. Margaret Hayes. Inside, a single sheet of paper. 4 words, each letter carefully cut from different newspapers and magazines, creating a ransom note effect. "Give it back, Margaret." Her breath caught in her throat. Someone knew about the money, knew her name, knew where she lived. She looked through the curtains and saw a black sedan parked at the end of the street, headlights off, but the engine idling low, like a predator waiting in the shadows. The windows were tinted so dark she couldn't see inside, but she could feel them watching her. Margaret's mind raced. This wasn't a bank error. This was something else, something dangerous. She realized this was no ordinary mistake. Margaret had been a librarian for 40 years, and during that time, she'd helped her late husband with his work. Thomas had been a Navy cryptographer before his retirement, brilliant with codes and digital systems. He'd taught Margaret things: how to recognize patterns, how to think like someone trying to hide information, how to use technology that most people her age never touched. Using her late husband's old shortwave radio, an antique she'd kept in his study, dusty but still functional, Margaret began scanning frequencies she shouldn't have. Thomas had shown her how to find the hidden channels, the ones that criminals and intelligence agencies used because they thought old technology was beneath notice. She picked up frequencies she shouldn't have. A synthetic, computer-generated voice was repeating her address and the exact amount, over and over, like a broken record. 1247 Oakwood Lane, 10,003. 1247 Oakwood Lane, 10,003. A criminal organization's artificial intelligence system had failed and sent the funds from an illegal transaction to the wrong account, hers. Somehow, in the vast digital network of illegal money transfers, an algorithm had glitched and deposited cartel money into the account of an 80-year-old retired librarian. In the hours that followed, the psychological terror escalated. The lights in the house began to flicker in Morse code. Thomas had taught her Morse decades ago, and she recognized the pattern immediately. Return, return, return. The phone would ring, and upon answering, Margaret heard only heavy breathing and the phrase, "Time is running out." No voice modulation, no accent, Just a flat, artificial tone that made it clear she was dealing with something beyond normal criminals. Every time she looked out the window, the black sedan was still there, sometimes on her street, sometimes around the corner. Always watching, always waiting. She knew that if she went to the police, they might treat her as an accomplice before they ever protected her. An 80-year-old woman with $10 million in her account. They'd assume she was part of it, that she'd been laundering money for years. She had to act. Margaret is alone against an invisible system. Do you think she can escape? Type strong Margaret in the comments to support her. But Margaret was no ordinary elderly woman. Her late husband had been a Navy cryptographer, and he had taught her that in the digital world, the best defense is chaos. Never try to hide from a system that's looking for you, Thomas used to say. Instead, make so much noise that they can't find the signal in the static. Instead of trying to hide the money, Margaret began to move it. But she didn't move it to another bank or try to withdraw it in cash. That would leave a trail leading directly back to her. She began to donate the funds in small, untraceable increments to every local charity, hospital, and school in the county. $5,000 to the children's hospital, $10,000 to the homeless shelter, $20,000 to the school lunch program, $50,000 to the animal rescue. She worked methodically, using every charity database she could find, spreading the money so thin and so wide that it would be impossible to trace back or recover. Every transaction was under the reporting limit. Every recipient was legitimate. Every donation was anonymous. As the sun began to set, the men in the black sedan finally approached her door. Margaret watched through the window as 3 men in dark suits emerged. They weren't just hackers, they were enforcers, the kind of men who made problems disappear. They didn't knock, they simply broke down her door with a single powerful kick. But when they broke down the door, they found Margaret sitting calmly at her kitchen table, sipping tea from her good china, the set she saved for special occasions. She held up her tablet, showing a balance of 0. The money was gone, distributed among thousands of innocent people, 47 different organizations, 632 individual transactions, all completed, all processed, all irreversible. If they killed her, the money would never be recovered, and the trail would lead the authorities straight to the cartel's digital heart. Every charity would be investigated, every transaction would be scrutinized. The IRS, the FBI, financial regulators, they'd all descend on the paper trail Margaret had deliberately created. The cartel would be exposed not because of their crimes, but because of their money appearing in hundreds of legitimate organizations. Margaret looked the lead enforcer in the eye and said, "The money is back in the world where it belongs. Now, you can leave, or you can stay and explain to your boss why you let an old lady outsmart your billion-dollar machine." She took a sip of her tea, her hand perfectly steady despite the 3 armed men standing in her kitchen. The lead enforcer stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the tablet, at the transaction logs, at the impossible web Margaret had created. He pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke in a language Margaret didn't understand. When he hung up, he looked at her with something that might have been respect. The men realized they had lost. The digital trail was too wide to close. They retreated into the night, leaving Margaret in silence. The black sedan disappeared. The Morse code lights stopped flickering. The threatening phone calls ceased. Margaret had made herself too expensive to kill, too complicated to silence. Margaret proved that courage is more powerful than any algorithm. If you were moved by her bravery, leave a like and share this video with someone who needs to see that it's never too late to fight back. Now click on the video appearing on your screen to see another incredible mystery. See you next time.